could use Python for that. This is going to be interesting because what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through solving a problem, an actual problem, and then you will see how you could use machine learning for that. And I'm going to leave the rest of the Python documentation and whatnot by just providing a pointer to what you can look at. You're all good at looking up the web, so just look at the website, figure out how to use it. But we'll actually go over fundamentals today, and then it's good to figuring out the details and what APIs to call is something that you can always look up online. So I'm not going to delve into too much detail there, but I'll give you a cheat sheet which you could just use to figure out what you want to look at, and then you can go back and see what it is. All right. Any questions so far? So we're going to look at this thing called learning from data paradigm. This is a slightly different paradigm than what you might be used to. How might a typical scientist approach this? Let's look at a person maybe who is studying biology. He may say, let me actually, before you even look at the data, let me build a model. So he's going to posit a bunch of things. He's going to say, if I'm studying, let's say, some microorganism, I'm going to assume some process goes on, and I'm going to come up with a theory, a very complicated theory, and then I'm going to run an experiment, and then I'm going to check, is this hypothesis supported by my theory or not? Yes? That's what you do in science, right? You run an experiment and then you ask. So you design everything before you even look at the data, and then you collect data and see, does it fall in line with what you predicted, right? That's one way of doing things. That's what you do in physics or chemistry or whatever. The other way of doing this, this is not a new thing, by the way. The paradigm has been there before. So one might say, let's not think about that. Let's ask, what does the data itself reveal? So we ask the data. We first collect data, and then we try to come up with some model that fits the data well. And then we might not understand how it really works, but it guides us onto an understanding. Okay? And I'll explain this paradigm really well because you will see it in action. In this class, we're focusing on only one learning model. I'm going to talk only about one learning model. Why? Because we're going to get to this in depth, right? So we will understand exactly how this works, and once we understand that, you will have a good picture of how machine learning works at a high level, so that you can always look up new models, new algorithms, new ways of doing it, right? This is not a class on research in machine learning. This is just to get you started. And I'll show you a demo in Python of how you can use it. All right, any questions so far? Okay, yes. What is what? A data map. I'm not quite sure. If you give me context, I might be able to tell you something about it.
I'm not sure if I can ask this, but then in an assignment, you got data, and then it asks us to plot at least one data map. So it has a name of countries, like country-related things, like country, capital, longitude, latitude.
Okay.
So I'm not really sure what data map is, but as far as I think, maybe to locate.
I'm not quite aware of it either. It might be something specific to the assignment or whatever. So probably ask the TA. All right, so here we are. It is the year 1609, and we are astronomers, and we are trying to understand the laws that govern the motion of planets, okay? So that's what you want to do. Newton has not even been born, so there is no theory of gravitation. We don't know how it works. All we know is we have observations, we understand what planets are, we know what stars are, we have tracked their orbits down to some degree through observations, because telescopes have been invented, right? But we really don't understand how things work, right? All they figured out is there is Earth, then there is Jupiter, there is Mars, and a bunch of planets, and you can observe them as they move through the sky, right? This is the 16th century, right? So astronomers with some observations have measured the distance of planets from the sun and the planet's period, which is how long it takes to orbit, right? They have come to some understanding. This has taken years for them to do it, right? This is how it looks like. Remember in that time you didn't have Uranus, Neptune, Jupiter, none of those other planets were there. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto were not even discovered, right? They were much later. So we have data only up to Saturn: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. First, so that is the planet. This tells you the distance from the sun, right? In some unit called the astronomical unit. It doesn't matter, but it's some unit called the astronomical unit, right? And this tells you the period, that is the time it takes for this planet to orbit in the scale of Earth years. So you see Earth takes exactly 1 year, you see? Mercury is only 0.161 times of the Earth, right? So it's in relative to that size. Is it clear? So we have this data that people have gathered, astronomers have gathered. Can this be used to derive a law? Does this make any sense? Okay? What do we do with this? Right? So this is, we are going way back. Let's visualize the data, right? Let's visualize it. So on the x-axis is exactly this column, right? Y-axis is this column, okay? You want to see that in the notebook? Let's do that. A bunch of configurations, nothing major, right? Here is the same data, right? Whatever I showed you on the slide, it's this stuff. Let me just very quickly, don't worry about this for now. I'll show you what it means later. Right, same thing. We just plot them using scatter. You see how I say plt.scatter? And then the first column is distance, second column is time, and this S parameter indicates the size of this dot, right? So 60 is like 60 points or whatever, right? So if I make this, say, 10, let me show you. This dot will become smaller, yeah? That's what's going to happen. Anyways, we're back. All right. Is it a straight line? It's not a straight line. There's some curvature here. We don't know what it is. It's something weird, right? So it's hard to understand what's going on. Luckily, we talked about the idea that sometimes insights may be revealed by transformations of data, right? So if I were to, sometimes center the data, I might subtract the mean, divide by something, right? You might get something interesting. It doesn't look like a straight line now. Very luckily during that time, Napier's had just invented logarithms, 1590, okay? This is where he invented how you could multiply and large numbers using logs. So he invented what are called Napier's bones. Anybody heard of them? Okay, right? The manuscript was published only in 1614, by the way. But still, so there was correspondence between these astronomers, Napier's, Tycho Brahe, and a bunch of people, right? So what they did was, they asked, what if we actually plot log time over log distance? So we just plot both of them on a log scale. Okay, you take logs on both sides, and then you plot them. What do you see? Let's see. You see how so we talked about NumPy, right? NumPy has a log function. The great part about it is it operates element-wise on arrays. So if I give you df.r.values, it's basically an array. You see that? Boom, let me just show you. df.r.values is the distance, right? That's the array of distances, right? I can take a log of it. What does that look like? It is going to take an element-wise logarithm, yeah? That's what's going to happen. Every element's log is going to be taken. You see this? Okay, that's what I'm doing now. So x1 is that guy, y1 is the log of the time, yes? So far so good? Okay. We plot this. Let's go ahead and plot this, right? You see this? It's much more like a straight line, but not quite, right? It looks piecewise linear to me in some sense, right? But it's not quite a line. So you can't really draw a perfect straight line through this, passing all lines. Is it clear? You see that, right? Now, why do we see that? Now, one possibility is that there might be experimental errors, right? Your telescope is not accurate. So you always have some errors in your data. Now, if it was perfect and there is actually a line, you would actually see all of them exactly in one straight line. But that's not the case because there are errors in your measurements, right? And depending on how much errors you have some deviations. So there is no way you can draw a perfect line here. So now, let's go back.
So,
yes?
theoretically, does it mean mathematically it should be a straight line?
We don't know. But you see, we never get the true picture because we always have errors.
Okay. But that's when we have the data, right? When
Every data measurement that you make has errors due to apparatus. You have to account for it. You don't know how much it is, right? So there is no way you can make a perfect fit. There is no way you can ask anything. All you can say is within experimental error, this is what we have. That's what science is about.
I'm asking mathematically, can we prove that log time versus log distance graph should be a straight line?
We'll go about that. We'll go about to that later. That requires a very different route, and I'll allude to it later at some point. But we'll see. Right? So it looks like log time versus log distance might be a straight line. Right? Right? Everybody with me here so far? All right. Now, a straight line is defined by 2 points, right? Y equals mx plus c, or x1, x2, and y2, y1, y2, right? We have to, if you define 2 points, you can always draw a unique straight line between them. Yes or no? Okay. Now, but the question is, we have more than 2 points. How do we draw a straight line, right? This is the era of big data then, right? This is more data than you can handle possibly, in some sense, because you don't know what to do with this now, right? How to draw a line. If you choose any 2 points, like I decide to choose some points and draw a line between them, it's not going to explain all observations, right? There is an issue there, right? So, for example, if I choose to use only 2 points, let's say I chose to use only the data for Earth and data for Venus, and I drew a line. It seems to explain the data for Mercury and say Mars well, but then fails on Jupiter and Saturn. Yes? If I had chosen to draw a line between these 2 points, then I would just lose all of this, right? None of these 4 observations would be explained. Do you see that? Right? So it's almost impossible for you to do that. It's completely impossible, right? So earlier people were only looking at, they thought if you have 2 equations, 2 unknowns, we can always solve it. It's all great. Now you can't do that, right? So this is the new challenge now. How do we solve this? And so this is attributed to Gauss, right? Gauss came up with this idea that, hey, let's not just choose 2 points. What if we just completely twist the problem around and say, we want to find a line that will be drawn in such a way that it minimizes the errors between all these observations we have so far. I don't really need to fit any particular observation exactly, but I can draw some line which will minimize the errors between what we see and what this line predicts. Yes? This is a completely new paradigm. This is what they didn't look at fitting it exactly at all. They said what is the best fit, right? Yes.
Why are we looking for drawing a line first of all?
Because you see this guy, we can't draw a straight line. You see, there is no unique equation of a line that will put everything together. So we pose it, we ask. It looks like a straight line on visualization. So we plot this, and then you see it looks like it looks very much like a straight line, but it is not, right? Because the data itself is noisy. So we want to find out what is the potential or plausible model that will fit this. Now you could use a parabola, but it's not going to do a great fit, right? So you might have to. This is where the ingenuity comes in. What is the right function to use? Yeah, the closest. But you see, you can never approximate it exactly. There will be an error. You want to fit that function which will minimize this error, right? In some sense. So how do we do this? So instead of having to choose 2 points, we ask the question, what if we minimize total error over all observations, right? So I'm saying it's not that I want to fit Earth's data perfectly. I want to fit everything, but I want to minimize the overall error. So it may be passing something in between, right? This is not trivial to solve. How might we solve this? So look at how we formulated it. We have points. We have, let's say, n points, right? N observations. Let's call them observations, planetary observations. Xi is the distance in this case. Yi is the time. Okay? Whatever, the log of these 2 things, right? What you want to do, so this is something this is how it looks like. So do boom, 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 right? This is all the x's, these are all the y's. What do you want to do? You want to draw a line like this, right? And you want to measure errors from this line like this. You see? And you want the sum of these errors, in some sense, some metric on these errors to be small, right? Because you cannot fit a perfect line passing through all of these points. So what you want to do is do something like this. Let's say the line is given by axi plus b. A is the slope, b is the intercept. Yes, that's how you parameterize a line, right? So let's say this is what we have. So now we are saying square it. Why? Because I don't really care about whether the line is whether the point is above or below. I just look at absolute errors in some sense, right? We want to minimize the sum of squared errors over all observations, right? But this minimization is over what? What are we trying to minimize over? What are the parameters? This is a, yeah? No, y, see, yi and xi's are given to you. There is no, you have no choice in the matter. These are your observations. You want to understand what slope and what intercept should I use so that this thing is minimized. Note that what we have here is a function over a and b. Different values of a and b will give you different numbers here because x and yi's are fixed. Everybody see that? The data is fixed. What we have is what is the slope of the line, what is the intercept of the line. If I keep changing this, I'll get different values of errors. The error that I obtain here is going to be different than the error that I obtain like this. Yes? A line drawn straight is going to give you a different error than a line drawn vertically. Yes or no? So this is what this is. We want this function to be minimized. So let's look at this. This is a function over a comma b, right? This function is now, how do I define this function? This function is defined as sigma. Is this here invisible? Let's see. Maybe not. Let's use a different thing which is not going to interfere here. F of a comma b is sigma I equals 1 to n yi minus axi plus b whole square. Right? I'm sorry, what? Oh, yes, my bad, sorry. Good catch. Let's just use this guy. This is a function over a and b, right? We want to minimize over a and b. That's what you want to do, right? How do you solve this? We're not going to do this in class, but how do you solve this? Okay, that's try is one thing, but that's going to be like, if I give you something, what will you try? Is it going to give you an exact answer? Okay, that's a good idea, randomized search, right? You keep trying different values a and b. Is this a smooth function? Does the derivative exist? What should I derive? Okay, fine, derivative is what? Like what should I derive? What should I take a differential on? What parameters? First of all, what kind of a function is this? Over a and b. Remember, this is a and b. What kind of a function is this?
Involving, we have to minimize not one, we have to minimize two parameters. Like
Which is fine, but this is where. But what kind of a function is it? Forget about the minimization part. What is this a function of? Like what kind of function? Is it a linear function, a quadratic function? It's a quadratic function. So it's something like this. In one dimension, it's a parabola, right? So this is 2 dimensions. So this is something like this. Let's assume it's going to be something like this. It's a paraboloid, like this, right? It's something of this kind. How do you solve this? Right? Now we want to find the minimum. Now this is not hard. This has already been done by, this is not hard to do. The way to do this,
There are only 2 parameters, like how is it like?
no, there's a and b. Different a and b's will give you different values of this function. See, there are 2 variables, right? So you have, if you are drawing this on the floor here, you have the x-axis being this a, y-axis being b, and the value of the function is on the z-axis. Yes? Do you see that? So you will get something like a 3D function, right? So it doesn't matter how we do this. Let's go back. Now, do you understand the idea that we can now obtain an optimal set of parameters by solving this function, solving this optimization problem, right? How we do this is a different deal. You can actually do this because in multivariable calculus, You would have learned that if you want to minimize a function over multiple variables, you can take the partial derivative of each of this. So you can take delta f of delta A, delta f of delta B, set it to 0, find out what happens, prove, again, this is not the end of the situation. This is what is this called? This in multivariable calculus is called the gradient, yes? We talked about this maybe. This is called the gradient. If you set it to 0 and find out what values of A and B set the gradient to 0, you will get a solution for this equation. Now, is this a minimum or a maximum? That's one more question. How do we do that? For a one-dimensional function, let's say y equals f of x. Okay, how do we check for minima or maxima? What? Okay, compute the second derivative, and then what? What happens to the second derivative? If it is negative, it is a maximum, right? And the gradient is 0 at that point. So if the point is say x star, if this function is negative at that point, it's a maximum.
First derivative will give you the slope, right?
First derivative is going to give you the slope. You want to set it to 0, so the slope is always going to be 0.
Yeah.
But the question is the curvature. This is going to compute what is called the curvature. So if the curvature is like this, which means it is concave, that's a maximum, because now you see the derivative is 0 here. If the curvature is convex, right, that's going to be a minimum. So if delta square over delta x square is greater than 0, it's a minimum. So you will have something like this. What if it is equal to 0? It's called a saddle point. This is pre-calculus, guys, undergrads, right? You would have studied this, hopefully, right? Okay, so we can actually solve this equation. And this is what Gauss did in some sense. You can actually solve this equation and come up with an answer. Now, he may not have used calculus, but he can still do it, right? There is a way to solve this using only linear algebra, by the way. It's called method of projections. You can just solve it using linear algebra, okay? But it's easier to understand through calculus because it's a continuous function and you can differentiate it. So here's what's going to happen. Let us go back. I'm going to illustrate all of this that I just told. So this is a function that is just going to plot a line given the slope and bias, right? Given A and B, it's going to plot a line and then show you how it looks like. So here is a beautiful thing. You can now you can have an interactive display where you can say, I can set the slope and the bias, and I will ask you what is the error. Yeah, this error is going to get computed. So look, if the slope is 0 and the bias is 0, what's happening here? It's a line parallel to the x-axis. Yeah, that's what this is, right? In this case, you pass through only one point. Your errors are going to be large. You see the error is 3.34. Yes or no? Okay. Now I start increasing the slope. I start fitting this line. Error starts decreasing. Why? Yeah, because now you're the error function. You're trying to fit the data, right? Slightly better, right? Now the error is 0.4. 0.05, right? Really, really sharp drop. And then it increases again because this is not a good fit again. And then you're out again, right? So now it looks like I haven't even solved this problem. I'm just experimenting, like as you said, right? We're just trying to fit using some random values. It looks like at this point, A will be somewhere close to 1.5, right? And B is the slope, which is almost close to 0. Right? This is what you seem to get through just tinkering with this thing. If you solve the equation if you actually solve this minimization problem, right? You solve this minimization problem, find the value of A and B. What do you get? Okay, so let me show you how that is done. It's not too hard. Here we are. So all you say is, the toolkit which will do this for you in almost all of machine learning is scikit-learn, sklearn, okay? Note this down. There is, of course, it's all there in the slides, but let's see. So all you do is you create an object saying, I want to solve this equation, right? And this is the data. So I'm saying, find me the best fit for the parameters of A and B, where the data is now given by x1, which is all the distances, and what I'm trying to predict or what I'm trying to regress against what I'm trying to use the y variables are essentially the times, right? The log of times, yeah? That's all I'm doing. I call this function, it prints out, it does some stuff, it essentially solves this optimization problem, okay? It's not hard to solve this problem. You could do this right now. You can take the differential of this, set it to 0, find out what it looks like, yes? Okay, yes, any question? Log doesn't help. What? Yes. So we could, but you see, this is a perfectly simple example of a straight line. Look at this. Hold on to your question. So in this particular case, we agree it's not a straight line. This is just the raw data, right? Now we'll talk about what happens if it is not a straight line. But for the purpose right now, look at how those guys did it. They just took the logs and found it to be a straight line, right? This is a transformation. We'll talk about whether you need this transformation at all. But hold on to your question, okay?
Can you go to that graph?
Which graph?
Where you were changing the slopes.
This is the slope.
We were just changing the slope. That means we're just changing the A value, right?
Yes.
So
that is what always passes to the origin.
okay.
You see, B is always set to 0 right now. So it's always passing through 0, 0.
Yeah, but if we that B we are assuming, right? There's
No. You can keep tinkering it. Watch. Right?
That's what my question. So changing the value of B also can result.
Oh, of course.
We were changing just A.
Yeah. I was just for the purpose of demonstration. But if you want to search this, you would essentially search every combination of slope and bias and find out what is the value that is going to make this minimum. Now you don't want to do this search. You can actually do this analytically, okay? And the way to do that is here, right? You just run this guy, it will predict it. And now I'm going to use it has essentially found the values A and B. Okay, I'm going to print them out here, but watch. So A is approximately 1.52, which is close, and B is minus 0.1, okay? So this is a best fit line. How does it look like? It looks like this, right? You see the error? The error is 0.04, right? Really, really good fit. You remember, if I keep tinkering with this, you don't get,
We're getting 0.05.
yeah, or you might get something close to it, but it's not perfect, right? And if I try arbitrary other things, the error keeps increasing. Yes, do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we have found out that A is approximately close to 1.52 and bias is minus 0.11. So let's say it's 1.5. Where did it go? Here we are. What does this really mean? What does this mean? Now we have found out that the slope of this line is 1.5 and the bias is some small negative term. It doesn't matter what it is, but let's say whatever it is, 0.1, yeah, something of this kind, yeah, okay. What does this imply? Watch, again, we are now saying something of this kind, log t, right, which was what we were using, is approximately equal to, or actually 1.5 times log r minus 0.1, yes? Right? So what is this? This is something like this. Log t is equal to 3 over 2 times log r, yeah? Minus some 0.1. Now, what we are saying is the following. If you take exponentiation on both sides, okay, so this is something like this. Let me just write it down completely. 2 log t equals 3 log r plus some c, right, for the purpose of this thing. C is here negative. It doesn't matter what it is. Now exponentiate everything. So what you get is, let me do this actually. Let's not exponentiate yet because I want to get everything perfect. So here we go. Okay? Do you see this? All I did was take the 2 onto the exponent inside the logs. Yes? Now just take an exponent on both sides. You'll get something like t square is equal to r cube plus some constant, right? Times, right? Some constant, which means t square is proportional to r cube, right? Do you see that? Right? So this is t square is proportional to r cube. What does that mean? Okay, we looked at this code. Let's go back. Present. What's wrong with present? Boom. Come on. We have just discovered Kepler's third law. Completely from scratch, yes? And we also learned what is called linear regression, the simplest possible model in machine learning. Any questions?
Kepler did it by hand.
Sure, but all of this can be done by hand.
We arrived at this model using the values of A and B, some particular values of A and B, right? 1.5.
Yes, but that was obtained through solving this problem, this minimization problem. Any questions? This is Kepler's third law of planetary motion. Check it out. T square is proportional to R cube.
But we do have errors in that plot, right? That line doesn't.
Which is exactly the thing. You see this model has now managed to get rid of these errors and try to find a model that explains all of the data to the best. Right? And that model now is saying, if you use this model, it is very likely under all experimental observations that T square is proportional to R cube. Now, let me get back. If you had to do this, if you didn't want to do this, you would have to wait 100 years or something until Newton came by and proposed all of his laws of motion, right? From those laws of motion, you can analytically derive every single law, right? So if you apply first law, whatever it is, right? Newton's first law, second law, which is force is directly proportional to acceleration, and third one, action in this thing. If you use that stuff and you understand how gravity works, it's an inverse square law, right? Newton also came up with gravity. F is equal to G m1 m2 over r square. Yes? If you know all of this and you understand how you and you'll figure out the three motions of the laws of motion, you can actually derive all of Kepler's laws, including this, analytically. No need of data. Is it clear? Right? So that's the other way of doing it. It is saying we start from ground principles up. We understand exactly how things work. We don't look at data, and now this will work exactly as we predict. It will actually tell you, if you were to use Newton's laws, it will tell you, look, from Newton's laws we can prove that equal areas are spanned in equal time. It has to be an ellipse. This is how it's going to look like, and this is how the period is going to be, right? And then you can actually point a telescope there and see exactly what happens. And within experimental area, you will get it all right. You can get all of this data back, right? Any questions? That's a very different way of doing it.
And you can also say that the points that we are getting for the planetary motion, the point that you brought, you will always have this minimum 1.5 and 0.1
No, because of this law, you see?
Going back,
you can explain it, but you couldn't get it from before. So if you are in 16th century, you didn't know all this stuff. You didn't know how the planetary motions moved. You didn't have Newton's laws of motions. But you still had all of this stuff. You could do it, right? So this was actually, it's a very interesting story. There was a point in time, not necessarily exactly the way I described it, but there was an object called Ceres, C-E-R-E-S, okay? Astronomers had observed it for some time and then it vanished, right? They didn't know where it went. And now the question was, when will it come back for us to observe it again? And so Gauss used exactly something very similar to actually trace out where it will appear next and when it will appear. And he actually solved this problem. So you can look it up. It's a very beautiful story on how he actually used least squares in some sense to figure out where this new object is going to be. Okay? All right. So any questions so far again? Good.
You had a doubt.
Did you?
You had a doubt, sir. You almost asked a question.
I'm not sure.
Okay, if you have something, let me know. All right, so now the question really is, so machine learning is, I would put it very similar to what we just did now, except that we now generalize it. We don't look at only linear functions. We might say, oh, we have some data that we want to fit. So here is again how it proceeds. I'm going to erase all of this. All good? Okay, so here is how it looks like. So we are saying there is something that we have observed. Let's call all of these things x. Okay, there is something that we want to predict. My God, this doesn't work. Okay, looks good. So let's say we have the following. Let me make a concrete example. Okay, so you have something like you measure, you take a, you sample a bunch of people. You actually conduct their gene profiles. Okay, so you actually figure out which genes are on, which genes are off. Okay, so you have person P1. His gene profile is a bunch of numbers. Okay, person P2. His gene profile is a bunch of numbers. P3 gene profile, bunch of numbers. This is data. Okay. You also at some point know, do they have cancer or not? Okay. Do they have lung cancer? Okay. So this is lung cancer means 1, not lung cancer means 0. Okay. Healthy means 0, 1. This is what you have. You have a large number of these. What you want to do is you want to learn a function f. Okay, which will take in what? It will take in something of this kind. A bunch of observations from for some arbitrary person, let's call him x, and map it to a space y, which could be 1 or 0s, or it could be anything you want, right? So it's learning a mapping from one domain to another domain. F is a function which does that. We don't know what f is. F is incredibly complex. One way to do that is say, okay, I'm going to study genetics from the scratch, right? I'm going to look right with a microscope, figure out every single chemical process that's going to happen, figure out how ribosomes are working, everything possible, how genes are expressed to a level of certainty that I'm exactly sure what f is. And I can predict perfectly how I can, whether you're going to get cancer or not. That's one way of doing it, right? That's going to take you ages. The other way of doing it is, oh, I don't really care about exactly how the biological process works. I just want some approximation to f, right? F is a true function. I don't know what f is, but maybe there is an approximation which is easily computable. And I don't know what f prime is, what this approximation is, but I want it to be reasonably good at predicting this. And I don't even know what f prime is going to look like. It doesn't have any biological meaning. It may not have anything at all. It's just some function which approximates this function, but does very well on this task, right? This is machine learning in a nutshell. All we're trying to do is what we call function approximation, right? In this particular case, in the case of planetary motions, we chose f prime. We didn't know how things worked, but we chose f prime to be a linear function. Yes or no? It is linear in some parameters. Those parameters with the log of the distance and the log of the period. For some reason that worked perfectly. How would we do this if we didn't take this log? What would we do? We are given all these t's and r's, right? So we have r as our x's here, t's as our y's. So we have Earth 1.0, 1.0, Mars 1.53, something like 3.7, whatever, right? I don't know the data, but it looks like this. We are saying learn a function f, which will take in r and output t. We don't know what it looks like, but you could learn a function f prime and assume that f prime is some polynomial. Let's assume a polynomial of degree 3 or 2, whatever, right? So we are now asking, something of this has happened, right? That data looks something like this, yes? You could ask, can I fit a parabola to this? We are now looking at something like this. We are asking, can we fit a function like this? Y equals ax square plus bx plus c. This is a parabola, yeah? Yes, this is a parabola, right? Find these parameters which will fit this, again with the least error, and it works, right? Find that. Now these are all generalizations, right? You can all do this. And in fact, the linear regression that I talked about, the general case, will do it. Okay, you don't necessarily have to do it. The way you do this is you say, all of these are features in your table. So you actually compute what is called x square. You compute what is for each of these data points, and then you run linear regression. Note that you could have chosen to do this. This is all linear in. If these were your observations for every point. So for Mars or Earth, you had actually computed this, like the time square. You had computed time t. You had computed t square. Let's say you had done all of this, right? And t cube also. And you had asked, from all of these three things, predict whatever you want to predict. Okay? Is this clear? Or are you lost? Okay, maybe you're lost. Okay, let's go back. We talked about the general case, right? The general case is a case where we don't necessarily need to restrict ourselves to a line. Okay, so again, let's go back. So we are given R's, right? This is what we have observed. We want to learn a model given f, learn from R to t. Yes, that's what you want to do. But we could change this. If we had assumed this to be a linear function, then it is, you have to put a line, right? You don't want to do that. What you do is, you say, for every observation here, let's call this planet 1, right? You had computed R, right? Now, let's say you also compute R square, which is very easy to do. Yes, you can compute R cube and so on and so forth. You can go up to any mth order you want. It doesn't matter, right? Now you're saying, here is what I want to do. I want to find a function f. You can call it a linear function now. Find a line which will take in R, R square, R cube and so on and predict t. This is still a line, right? It's still a linear function. You're going to say this is going to be something of this kind. A plus BR plus CR square plus DR cube, blah, 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 right?
So it's a linear combination of these.
It's a linear combination of these things. So it's a polynomial, but it's still linear in what you have here. So you can still use linear regression for this, right? And there is a general solution for such things. So now, what are these things called? Note that now instead of having only one thing here to predict something else, earlier you had a scalar value here and a scalar value here. Now you don't have that. You have a vector, right? You have multiple things here, and you want to predict one thing, right? Do you see that? Yeah. It's like saying I have your height, I have your weight. Can I tell you something about your blood mass in BMI? Height and weight are given, find BMI, okay? It's an easy formula, but whatever. This is how you do it, right? So you have, this is what is called a feature vector now. Generalizations, right? Instead of having one scalar predicting another scalar, you have a feature vector predicting something else. This need not even be a scalar. It could be anything you want. It could be another vector, for example. But this is how it looks like. So we are just mapping functions from one domain to another, right? And linear regression is just one of the models you could use, right?
In this way, we can compute linear regression on literally any function, right? Any two.
Yeah, but you have to design these features. Yeah. Now there are models which don't necessarily assume to be a line. So you don't have to compute this. It is done internally, right? So if you look at machine learning literature, you'll find that. But that's what not. So this is the idea here, right? So idea here is again a big picture. You are trying to find a function f, an approximation to a function f, taking in a bunch of feature vectors and predicting some value out. We don't really care about what f reveals to us about the actual process of how this is happening, right? This could be anything. We don't know. So in this case, when I'm predicting whether you have cancer or not from your gene data, I have no particular understanding of what is actually happening biologically, right? All I know is that there is given a bunch of gene expressions, I'm learning some approximation of something, right? Which you can actually plot. You can actually see what the function is, but it may not have great relevance biologically. It might be possible for you to extract the information out, but it doesn't really give you great biological relevance, right? Is this clear? But it will do the job. Like if at some point I needed to do this, I have to figure out, it doesn't matter, let the biologists continue working on, figuring out how cancer works. We need to figure out right away if this guy has cancer or not. We can do it using such methods. These are called predictive models. Okay, so if you look at predictive models, you'll get something very similar to this. Right, so this is what machine learning is. And you look at what I meant by this f prime. F prime is some function you want, is the approximation of the actual function f, right? You can restrict it to certain classes. You can say, I'm going to look at only the class of linear functions. Okay? This is what is called a hypothesis class. If you're ever going to take machine learning, this is what's called a hypothesis class. It doesn't matter. Or you could say it's always going to be polynomials of degree 10. Okay? Which means given data, I'm only going to assume that the data comes from polynomials of degree 10 and find out what is the best fit and so on, right? This is what's going to happen. Or I could say, oh, it's going to be an incredibly complex function. Maybe it's going to be a function which is based on exponentials, sines, cosines, whatever. You can choose that. Yes.
But that would depend on the data.
Yes, so that is why we do the first step, which is we plot the data, we visualize it, we try to understand what might be a relevant hypothesis.
But you can just take a very high degree
You
polynomial
could, and then what?
fit everything in.
Fit everything, and then that, I'm going to talk about what happens if we fit everything. That's a good point. So we will see. So this, there are a lot of nitty-gritties in this thing, but we will see what happens. So I'm going to slightly give an example. So let's see. Where are we here? We are here. Like, let's go back to machine learning. Yeah, here we are. Maybe this is a good idea. Okay, this notebook is going to be shared with you guys, so you can do all sorts of stuff. It has a lot of other things than what I'm going to talk in class because it has almost everything related to machine learning. But we are not going to focus on that because I want to give you only the concepts right now. So let's see. Here is what I'm going to do. Oops, maybe something went wrong. Or I didn't do this. Give me 2 minutes. I didn't run a bunch of other things here. Let's run this. Boom, 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 boom. So this is the annoying part of Python. If you restart your notebook, you have to rerun stuff, okay? All right, let's see. So as you will know, what you will see here is interesting. So there is a true function, okay? This is going to be some curve like this, the red line, you see that? And there are noisy samples, which are the blue ones that you have taken out. So you actually, as a machine learner guy, you only see the blue guy, okay? You don't see the red line initially. Do you see that? Okay. So you have some true function, okay? That's probably going to be something like this. Let's see, for the purpose of explanation. Let's say the true function is this, okay? It's some function like this, okay? Now what happens is, you don't see this. What you see are samples drawn from this, only individual data points with errors, okay? So what you will see again is something like this, bing, bing, bing. Okay, these are all points. Maybe there's a point here, maybe there's a point here, okay? Now, let's forget about this demo for a second. What if I want to fit a line to this? A simple straight line. What line would I draw? Unfortunately, there are no colors here, but let's see. Something like this, very high errors, right? You see all of these points are not on the line, and they're really hard to explain. A degree 2 polynomial. What is it? It's going to be a parabola, right? How is that going to look like? Look, a parabola can't change its shape. It has to be either like this or like that. So it's going to be something like this. Yeah? Yeah, okay, whatever. It's going to be something of this kind, but you see that this is not going to be a good fit. A cubic polynomial, something like this, x cube. Now that can wiggle. You might have seen this. It's going to be something like this, right? So this now may be a good approximation, right? It can wiggle. But note, if you are looking at polynomials of degree 3, we are saying something like this. We are saying something like this: y equals a plus bx plus cx square plus dx cube. Yes? Now, is this going to fit this function? Let's say this function is y equals sine x. The true function is y equals sine x, but noisy now, okay? Can such a cubic polynomial approximate y equals sine x? Well, anybody? Why not? Like I'm talking about approximations. I'm not talking about exact answers.
Small x, if you have enough for larger.
Sure, but at any given local neighborhood, can you approximate by a cubic? You can, right? So let's ask this question. Anybody know? So we won't get into a lot of things, but this can always be expanded out in a Fourier series, a Taylor series, yes? That is going to have terms like a constant term maybe, plus a degree in x, plus a degree in x square plus a degree in x cube, right? I don't know the exact the Taylor series expansion of sine x, but you guys can figure it out. It's probably x minus x squared by 2 or something of this kind, right? That curve is going to approximate y equals sine x really well. It's only in the fourth order when things go off, right? It has an error which is going to be O of x to the 4, yes? If you study Taylor series approximations. You can approximate this with a cubic polynomial. It has some errors, but it will be reasonable. So what you will now see, if you had a cubic polynomial, is something like this. What if you had a degree 27 polynomial? And there was no noise? Even better approximations. Right? Agreed? If there was no noise and everything was perfect, I could approximate this function with a degree 27 polynomial perfectly, really, really well. Agreed? But there is noise. And if there is noise, what will happen to this degree 27 polynomial if there are only 30 or 20 points here? So suppose you have only 20 samples, and you say I want to fit a degree 27 polynomial. What will happen? You will fit every point perfectly, but there is noise to it. So now you have fit to the noise. You learned the wrong function. Instead of learning sine x, you learned some complex degree 27 polynomial which had noise. So if there was no noise, you'd be perfect. It would work, but there is noise. And so in practice, you will always find noise. So you will overfit. Now let me show you how that works. This is something very similar, right? So a degree 1 polynomial, which is a line, doesn't fit this data well. You see? Yeah. Is it clear?
Yeah.
Let's see if this works. Okay, now a degree 2 polynomial is going to be something like a parabola. Okay? You see? It's much better. You can, even visually, right? Degree 3 looks, there is something going on. 4 looks, let's see, what happened to 4? 5, 6, no, slightly getting better, okay? Now watch what happens now. Degree 27, you see this complex thing? Every single line is getting, every single point is now being fit. But this is due to the noise. Because you had noisy samples, you did not trace this red curve correctly. Now you have some random function like this. This is called overfitting. Okay? So now in this case you have an overly complex model. A model that is too complex, which is but very little training data. If you had 10,000 points, then you would still not overfit. Because you have to have a 27 degree polynomial is not going to be characterized by 10,000 points. If I give you 26 points, you are going to overfit again. Right? Do you see that? You will overfit the moment you have situations where your model class is so complex, but you have very little training data, which means that you didn't get a good estimate of the function itself. Right? Is it clear? And you have noise. If you don't have noise, it's again different. Right? You could have issues.
To avoid this, we need to have as many samples as we
So
want.
no, there are two things. You either have a simpler model. You could say, I don't want to fit a degree 27 polynomial. I'm going to say, look, this function is unlikely to be 27 degree polynomials. It's going to be maybe at most degree 7. So I'm going to restrict myself only to a class of degree 7 polynomials, right? And I get this nice smooth function, right? Which is much better than the 27 degree thing, because that is even worse.
So how do we decide that when we are overfitting and when we are
So yes, it's a very good question. The way we do that is to have what is called a held down data set. A data set which, so we assume that this is not the full data. There is more data, but I did not use this for training. So I fit a model and then I evaluate on that. And then if I had overfit, I'll perform really poorly there. So if I had a 27 degree polynomial, I would have overfit so much here that when I try to find out what is the prediction for all those guys, it will say, oh, it's terrible, because none of them will match. But if I had done a good job fitting and actually finding the true function, then you would work on the other one also, and you'll get better results. So this is what is called cross-validation. You will learn about this in machine learning, but this is how it works. Okay, you have what is called a validation set. We don't, note again, because we have noise and because there is always this problem, we don't really, the goal is not to perfectly fit what we see here. The goal is to approximate the right function so that it does something, it does well on something else. So it generalizes well. The goal is generalization. So in a planetary example, it is not just enough for you to predict stuff about Jupiter and Saturn. It is important that when you see a new planet like Uranus, you want to say, look, can I predict exactly what the time period of that will be? Right? Or what about Pluto? You want that to generalize to other planets also when they are discovered or when we see data for them. It's not about exactly fitting only Mercury to Saturn. Do you see that? Is it clear? Right? We want the right model. So that is the tricky part about machine learning. We want it to generalize. It is not about memorizing. If I had memorized this data, then I don't need anything, right? We didn't learn anything new if we just memorized what we did. We want a generalizable law to come out, per se, right? So is this clear? This is how you would do. This is the concept of overfitting. So now there are two regimes, right? Yes.
So you said you talked about reducing the degree from 27 to 7.
Yes.
Right? So how do you is that 7 an estimate, or is there some reason behind it? Like, so how do I determine it?
No, that's what I said. That's what I told you. You have to use a held out data set, a data set which you have not figured out before.
So in your entire data set, you'll have to split your
split it into something. That's one way to handle it. The other way to think about it is the following. You could say, look, I know so much about the domain, like whatever this data came from. Let's say it came from audio signals. I don't know, right? But I know so much about it that it is very unlikely that you could have a 27-degree polynomial explaining this. The process then is incredibly complex.
Considering I don't have domain expertise.
If you don't have domain expertise, then your only option is to ensure that you don't overfit, is to ensure that you test it on a validation data set.
And then keep on
Yes, but I must point out that domain knowledge is sometimes very useful, because you will know whether you are doing the right thing. Sometimes the best performing models at any of these competitions, you go to Kaggle or whatever, is not going to be just obtained through black box stuff by choosing a random function. It is by figuring out what matters and using that. Okay, so if you want to be a good machine learner, and you want to solve a good machine learning problem, you have to invest time to understand the domain. Right? So let's say we want to predict the following. Right? Let's talk about. Let me give you an example. Let me think about this.
Basically predicting any problem that we want, like.
No, wait. I have something interesting. So let's see. Let me give you probably a simpler example. Okay, so here we are trying to figure out whether a person is going to get diabetes or not. Okay, we have his blood sugar levels and a bunch of things. We measure that. Okay, now at some point in time we will see that your model doesn't perform well. Okay, for some reason. You have a bunch of features. You take their blood samples, you measure the sugar levels, a bunch of things. Okay, but you figure out it doesn't work. Like, it doesn't work on a good section of people. Okay, then you figure out that this set of people have a slightly different gene. Okay, and they are more susceptible to diabetes, which the blood sugar levels itself don't catch. So now, if you are a computational biologist and you knew about the fact that there is this extra gene which is turned on or off, and if it's turned on, you're 99% more susceptible to diabetes, right? If you knew that and you added that as your feature, you would do incredibly well. You see, so if you don't have domain expertise, sometimes it will hurt you, right? Because now you are completely blinding yourself on the fact that there is additional information available for this which you didn't use. It's all a question of using information. If you didn't know this information existed, then your model is not going to learn it very well, right? But if you had this prior knowledge that, yeah, this section of this ethnicity group is susceptible to diabetes, it is a much higher prior probability, you could use that smartly. You see? Does this make sense?
But then there could be many things that I should be taking into account.
Yes, which is why if you want to do really well, you have to understand the problem you're solving. It is not about, I would discourage you from trying out a situation where you say, oh, this is data, this is labels, here is how I'm going to just plug in a bunch of things and see how it works. That is not going to give you great results. You might turn out lucky and it might just work sometimes, but that is not how to solve it. You have to at least understand what is going, spend some effort into understanding what might be useful. So I want to predict sentiments of tweets. Donald Trump tweets, Hillary Clinton tweets, sentiments of tweets. If I just blindly were to just take all of the words that she's using, or he or she is using, and then plug it into a classifier and say, oh, predict if it is going to be happy or sad, I'm going to perform poorly. But if I start looking at things like saying, oh, look, people start looking, not necessarily word embeddings, very simpler. You could say things like, oh, look, instead of using all words, maybe I filter it out only using only adjectives, because adjectives might reveal sentiment better, right? So the fact that I'm using bad or good is going to skew my things very well. So I might say, oh, but now let's say I removed not. there is a pipeline which removes stop words. Not is a stop word because it is used very common, right? So in NLP there is something called a list of stop words. What are they? They are words which are very frequent. We don't really care about them. Word like the, is, yes. So when I'm doing sentiment analysis, there is some pipeline which removes stop words, right? And now I'm trying to learn sentiment. I'm trying to predict sentiments. It's not going to work well because the fact that the guy tweeted the movie is not good now shifted to the movie is good because I removed not. So the sentiment of the guy was poor, but we predicted great. So that is wrong. So it is important that you understand what you're doing. So you have to know which features really matter. In sentiment analysis, stop words matter. I need to know whether you use not or not. It's not about removing it. But if I'm doing part of speech tagging, maybe it doesn't. Right? Is it clear? So you have to know what you're trying to do. At least you should have an insight into what might help. See, the function f might be complex, but what does it depend on is something that you have to decide. Right? It cannot, if this is a bunch of random things, it's not going to work. You cannot predict a lot of things from randomness. So there is something here which you have to decide, right? So question is, let's see, heights of people. You want to predict heights of people based on nationality. Can you do that? Right? Why? Because you have some idea of the fact that there's probably different phenotypes, right? The genes of some people may be different from the genes of some other people, right? So you could, in principle, there is a fundamental underlying principle here. It's a complex thing. How height is actually determined by your genes is complex. But we know that there is ethnicity plays a matter, right? Possibly. So you could use ethnicity as a feature. Yes or no? Yes. Is it clear? How ethnicity affects it is a totally different question. But we know that ethnicity is probably a factor. So it's good to include it.
But do you ever take a call like something does matter, but then you would still like to not, some feature does matter, but then you still take a call to not add it because it might make it just more complex because you're increasing the...
Well, it's a question of how accurate you want to be and what your trade-offs are, right? This is not, there's no blanket answer to this, right? So this is more like, at what level am I operating? If I'm trying to understand, like, this is the same question as you're asking me, how simple should a model be? It depends on what you want to do with it. If you're just purchasing a bunch of land here, it's perfectly fine to say land is flat. The earth is flat is a perfectly good model to use for many, many tasks. We don't need to know the curvature of the earth for many, many things. But if you're doing flight trips, you want to know the curvature of the earth, right? So it depends on how the model that you use is dependent on what you want to do, right? If you're running 10 kilometers, you don't care about the curvature of the earth, do you? Yeah. So a perfectly flat model works.
Sir, suppose if we know that ethnicity plays a role in the height of a person, suppose. But how do you come to know that whether it is a polynomial of degree 7 or 8?
No, you do not. That's the whole point. It's a complex function. You yourself do not. Now, a computational biologist might come up with a theory that says how it works. We don't know it yet, which is why you need to try different models and then use cross-validation to figure out what the right model is. This is called model selection.
Even if you try to get some knowledge, you won't become a scientist in biology.
Which is why you have to approximate it. Like you have to figure out, like you can try linear functions, polynomial functions, right? Different things. But
just like hitting in the dark.
No, it is not hitting in the dark. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It is not hitting in the dark. You have to plot these errors properly and use a validation set and figure out what is the right complexity. This is called model fitting.
You have to be scientific about it.
It is a scientific approach. It is an approach which says, I'm trying to search a bunch of things. So this is what I might call model complexity. Let's put it this way. Are we using linear functions? Are we using very complex polynomials? Okay. So this is like the degree of polynomials you're using here. This is the error on your validation set, which is a very different deal. Okay. So you have a very simple model. Let's say the actual function is complex, and I tried only a line. I'm going to have a very high error here. Okay. Do you agree? Now, I see a very high error. This is not good. So now I say, let me increase the model complexity. I make it a cubic polynomial. The error decreases. I make it a 7th degree polynomial. The error decreases. Now, very soon what will happen is, as you go like this, at some point you start overfitting. Why? Because you have a finite set of data points with noise in them, right? You will overfit. When you start overfitting, it will not work on the other data sets, on the validation set. So now this error will start increasing. and this point is where you stop. You can find that point.
If we take on the y-axis error on cross-validation,
Yes.
then in that case, what's the graph be like?
This is the error on cross-validation. What do you mean?
Even if we take cross-validation, that means that we are not considering noise. Like we are.
No. See, that's what. Sorry. The model is trained on the training data. I'm predicting on some unseen examples.
Yeah.
So if you do not do well on the unseen examples, you're not doing well. So I want to find out what is that complexity here, which we will do well on the unseen data, right? Because you're not training on that. It's the same thing here. Look.
Suppose if we are taking 10-fold cross-validation.
Forget about 10-fold cross-validation. This is just a simple thing. Like, look at this picture here. We fit a line like this, right? If I had not seen all of these extra points here. So let's say I did not see these points. To the left of this point, okay, the right of this point. Okay? Irrespective of what happens, I don't do well on these. Do you understand? Yeah. Right? And this is a very simple model. So it didn't do well. Now we start increasing this, right? We do much better. Suppose this was our validation set. We'll do much better here. And also we fit this also well, right? See, there are two parts. This part is what we trained on. This part is what we are trying to test on.
But when we are going for n-fold cross-validation and we change these things quite randomly.
So n-fold cross-validation, I would say yes, but you would do it, but that's a more sophisticated thing. Just try to get the basic insight here.
I was just wondering, like, if we go for cross-validation, n cross-validation, then what will the graph be like?
It will be some approximation of this. It will be some approximation of this. It will be something like this, some noisy version. It doesn't matter what you like. This is what is called, if you're evaluating out of what you train, you'll always see this curve like this.
So now my question is, like, if we are using this approach, then why do we do knowledge at all? Like, if this data.
So you will need domain knowledge. You will need domain knowledge because look, how do I know what matters? So let's say that I want to predict the stock prices of the New York Stock Exchange based on the length of feet. The length of your foot is what I'm going to use, and I want to predict something that is going to predict the stock exchange. Is it possible? You are a person, you are in a company right now, okay? I come to you as a customer. Hey dude, I have foot measurements. I have the length of your foot of a billion people. Everybody on the earth's foot I have measured. I want you to predict the stock price of Bloomberg tomorrow. Is it possible or not? You tell me.
Might not be a factor, obviously.
No, but then you don't. So you see, you don't have domain knowledge. You do not have domain knowledge. So you are not allowed to use any domain knowledge. You have to tell me whether it is possible or not.
Surprise, any day, like you might find some pattern also.
You will find a pattern. You will find a pattern, but it is going to be random noise. You will always find a correlation between something and some other thing, but it is not going to generalize. So if given all previous data, you will always find something that works.
Okay, just in brief, like you mean to say that we just can find all the factors that affecting the final prediction.
You have to have an insight into what might solve the problem. It is not going to be like, I can't give you random features and ask you to predict something that is totally not going to depend on that.
So we cannot go quantitatively, but qualitatively we can say.
You have to have an insight. Now you may not be able to specify it concretely. You may not know whether it is going to be a 10th degree polynomial with the coefficients 25, 30 or whatever. It's going to be something, and you're hoping that the model will learn it.
Okay.
It is not going to be something that is going. It's not a genie. It's not going to say. You're not going to say I feed in length of the human foot and out comes the New York price. That's not going to happen.
So
Okay.
You just gave an example of Kaggle just now.
Okay.
In that we are already given a data set.
Okay.
Given all the features. Then we don't need any kind of domain knowledge in that case.
No, why not? Again, why not? Why not? Just because Kaggle gave you that thing doesn't mean anything, right? So let's see. So sometimes it might be the case that your model might learn something easier if you had looked at a transformation of the data. Maybe you squared it, maybe you took a square root. So maybe what matters, suppose they had given you data in this case. Like again, consider the planetary example. I gave you raw data, T and R, right? You are using linear regression. It is not going to work well. But now I take a transformation. I take log T, log R. It works better.
How did you came up with log T?
No. So this is just an example. The idea here is not to say that so every domain thing, everything that you do you have to have some amount of domain knowledge to figure out whether you're doing the right thing or not.
There are infinite functions possible. How will you choose like this is one with the log, T-log or will be the best one for this case?
You do not.
You have that astronomy.
That's what I told you. You have some understanding of how it is going. You cannot just solve a problem blindly. I'm trying to discourage you from the fact of trying to solve a problem blindly. That is not how things work. You have to have some understanding. Now, you might not have a great understanding, but you have to have some understanding. Otherwise, I'll give you a bunch of random features. No.
If you have heard about numer AI, have you heard about numer AI?
No.
In that case, they don't give you any features. Just give numbers and ask you to predict the outcome.
Yeah, I wouldn't do such a competition.
They're working on stock market only.
Yeah, but what is the point of the exercise?
They try to predict the next.
No, but what is the point of the exercise?
But I'm saying that people are working on such problems without knowing even what is the domain thing.
Well, I mean, yeah, there will always be a set of people, but I don't know what you're going to do with it.
Then they're getting money out of it.
But what is the point? Like, why would you do it? Is the data so confidential that you don't even need to know what is the features?
Maybe the commit doesn't want you to know.
Yeah, you will get a suboptimal model. That's all.
Probably have the discussion later.
Yeah, you'll get a suboptimal model. That's all.
Fine.
Let me put it that way.
Later on.
Okay, anything else? Any other question? All right, so let's do a very quick, I think that we've already covered everything. So scikit-learn has a bunch of models, all of them doing different things, and this is a nice cheat sheet to figure out where you lie. So you start from the top and you figure out where you want to go and then apply things appropriately. Again, noting that you need to know what you're doing. So if you're predicting a continuous value, like you're predicting the heights of people or the weights of people, then it's a regression problem. We talked about this, linear regression. Get into this bucket here. If you're going to do classification, does this guy have cancer or not? Boolean variables, 0 or 1, right? No continuous stuff. It's 0 or 1. Then do classification. If you just want to cluster them, so you want to say, I have a bunch of people with their characteristics. Just cluster them, find out what groups exist. Clustering, do that. If you just want to do what is called dimensionality reduction, I won't talk about this, but then you have a bucket here. This is taking stuff in high dimensions and reducing to a small number of dimensions. This is again useful for models, but this is completely unsupervised. So this is what I'm saying. So you learn all of this in machine learning. So this is not a class on machine. This is not a course on machine learning, which is why I'm just providing you a cheat sheet. And scikit-learn has excellent documentation. Go over to their website. They tell you how to use it with demos. Okay. So I think I'll leave it at that. Any questions? All right. So note the catch. Understand how these algorithms work. Otherwise, you will blindly apply them and they won't be doing the right thing. Okay. Fine. That's it, I guess. Yes, I will. I guess I will pass them over to the TA, and the TA will figure out how he will distribute them to you. Not exactly, but they are available. I will send it to. I think I'll just send it to Steve or the TA. I'll figure out what has to be done. Okay. Boom, boom.
I don't have the CS Scout email address because I'm at the department and I'm auditing this class.
You're auditing.
So, yeah, can I still do the homework?
I mean, I guess so. You just talk to the professor. He should be fine. Just
so
mail him.
I just wonder, your lab is require a CS Scout.
Okay. So I would suggest you talk to the TA. I'm not the TA for the class.
The Chinese guy?
Yes, the Chinese guy. Talk to him, and he'll probably know it. I'm just covering for these two classes. I don't know much about this stuff. What's up? Any questions?
I tried to load the thing.
This is not going to work. You need to have okay, so this is a thing that I've set up for my lab. So it's not going to be trivial. You have to use HTTPS. First of all, this will work. This will work like this, right? And then you have to say something like advanced, I guess. Add exception. So this is our lab here, and I have a password, right? So this is my stuff. Right now the password is Vivek. I just use Vivek for my stuff, right?
Okay.
So now this will load. This is not related to the course. This is my lab stuff, and I created something here.
Oh,
Like the setup is the machine that is using this is something related to my specific research.
Oh, okay.
Which is why you are not able to access it. It's all of this is available on GitHub, so I'll forward you the link there. That'll be a publicly viewable thing. Now this one is private.
And so, is there any kind of notebooks the class should be using or not?
No, you can just use Jupyter. So all you need to do is set up Python on your notebook, on your machine.
Yeah.
IPython on your machine.
Yeah.
Download the notebook I'm going to give you,
Yeah.
and open it there, and it'll work.
Okay, thank you so
That's
much.
all you need to do.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So this stuff is not going to work for all. So I'm going to kill this for now. Okay.
Okay, sure thing.
All right. All good?
Yes, thank you.
You're not like the TA for the class?
No, I'm not the TA for the
Okay,
class.
because I added it late, so then the homework for it. All right.
Okay, so you have to talk to this guy called Junting Ye.
Okay.
Talk to him, and he will figure out what the right thing is. See you guys.
It has been quite long since I have.
I had lunch, it's fine. So you want to now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye. Actually, there is a site called analyticsvidya.com.
Analytics.
Vidya.com.
Do you know how to go back? Huh?
We can still hear you.
You can?
Yeah, on the mic.
Let me